Delighted to be joined by former Southampton midfielder, 489 career appearances all told, all-round good guy, EFL presenter on Sky Sports. It's David Prutts.
Hello, thank you so much for having me on. It's always nice to keep it. I was going to say running total. I'm not going to play any more games, to be brutally honest, am I? So 489, I will take that. I can't remember many of them, but they're there for posterity, which is wonderful.
We might come to one particular moment later on. I want to start with Southampton. You would have seen them a lot last season in your role on the Championship, but they're sort of playing the same way that they did to get them up. How are you seeing it at the moment?
I think it's very ominous. I thoroughly enjoyed how Russell led the team last season. There were question marks at the very start of last season in the Championship when they had that 4 defeats on the bounce. He stuck to his guns. It bore fruits. He managed to overcome a team in the playoff final that racked up 90 points in Leeds and still didn't go up automatically. They dominated from start to finish at Wembley and were well worthy of that place in the Premier League. Now, obviously, moving on. The Premier League, being what it is, has shown just how unforgiving it can be.
Yeah.
I've bumped into Russell a couple of times over the season so far. Wonderfully, what you see is what you get. He's a very competent, confident, experienced manager. He is being beaten with his stick about how he wants the side to play in the face of evidence with your eyes and evidential statistics. But I've covered games where his players have done just the most ridiculous things, and he's obviously not asking for that. I did the Liverpool game, and you've got a game that's ebbing and flowing, and then the tide turns because his goalkeeper rolls it in to a midfielder on the edge of the box with 3 players around him, ends up in the back of the net.
Yeah.
And Russell's categorically not asking his goalkeeper to do that. That would be madness. He's asking his players to make certain types of choices, and hopefully the right choices more often than not. But the proof's there where they've shot themselves in the foot. I think statistically they're up there with the most mistakes leading to goals that are self-inflicted, which doesn't give you great hope or the biggest chance in the Prem. And as I said, it looks ominous. I'm sad in a way for him and the football club because having had experience of it, it's a cracking place to play football. But just year on year showing that gap that incrementally seemingly is getting bigger unless you can spend big bucks getting back into the Prem, which, as we know, with the profit and sustainability rules, makes that quite tough.
Well, David, that actually leads me to my question really nicely. It's almost as though you knew what I was going to ask, because you mentioned that that gap is incrementally increasing, and yet I sort of consider Southampton to be the South Coast big club. But you're seeing the likes of Bournemouth and Brighton who are bridging that gap and don't have, I think, as much resource as Southampton. So what is that?
I would say good, steady management and leadership. I think you've really got to look into how good the recruitment at Brighton has been. You get teams, and I'm not saying they're in a purple patch, but they've got a prolonged little portion here where the players that are coming in, and it becomes mutually beneficial. They play very well for Brighton. Brighton get themselves up the division. They sell them on for huge amounts of money. Bournemouth, I was listening to a podcast with Eddie Howe on, and he was talking about how that club had changed and how the evolution of that club was fascinating to hear from the inside. And you look at how well established they are. They've appointed a manager who certainly understands what the Premier League is. They've recorded some pretty decent results and seemingly are a team on the up. Whereas Southampton, perennially, before I got there, back in 2003, they were stalwarts of the Premier League, but always seemingly they waited to that last third of the season to kick on to get themselves safe. Gordon Strachan was there when I was there, and there was a period, and it's got nothing to do with me. I mean, I'm a bit like Forrest Gump, just wandering into the back of a picture and things going semi-well for a couple of hours. So we managed to get to the cup final, which I was cup tied for, and got into Europe the next season. So there was a 7th or 8th place finish, but then Gordon moves on, different managers come in, slips out of the Premier League, slips out of the Championship into League One, and then come full circle back to the present day, and it's seemingly a football club that finds itself with a foot in either camp of the Championship and the Premier League. I think the ability to develop players is something that we've all seen. They sell them on for a lot of money. There's a certain element of what if, I think, down on the South Coast where they picture this team which has been built on a Virgil van Dijk. Adam Lallana obviously has come full circle. so many players that have come and gone and made wonderful careers. Sadio Mane, the list goes on and on. Gareth Bale. I mean, yeah, he was knocking around the same time that I was at Southampton, and I've got a vivid memory, which one he will not remember at all, of he and I doing a bleep test when I thought I was pretty fit, and then this kind of goofy looking kid comes in and just destroys me and I think the other old pro that was doing it, and just kind of obviously his career progressed.
Are you saying you're responsible for them 5 Champions Leagues then?
I mean, I don't want to like word it as such, but if you want to take from that what I was insinuating, then thank you very much. And then obviously he got to the stage, didn't he? I think Harry was saying at Spurs that they couldn't win a game with him in the division, in the teams. So again, but going, I mean, a very kind of ramshackle history of Southampton there. But I just think, from an evolution point of view, I think Brighton and Bournemouth, because we used to play Bournemouth in pre-season friendlies back 20 odd years ago. But that then shows what they've done to cement and assert themselves. Small fan base, a tremendously well-run football club that was on the brink of extinction a generation ago. I would heartily go along with that. Traditionally, it was Southampton as a big boy, and you chuck Pompey into that, given at times what they've done.
Yeah.
But for me, right now, Brighton right at the forefront of that, and Bournemouth a close second.
So we see with Russell Martin and similarly with Ange Postecoglou that they, not internally at their clubs, but externally, they look under pressure from fans. As a player, you're going to see the news, you're going to see fan opinion. What is that like in the dressing room? And what might players be saying to the coach as well, or to each other on the situation?
Well, there'll be two ways of looking at it. If you are in his camp and playing, you would be fearful of him moving on. If you're not playing, very selfishly, you would be erring on the side of a clean slate coming your way pretty soon. That's how it's a team game. Footballers are obviously at the mercy of how good each and every one of that actual team is, but they're a ruthlessly selfish bunch. And I think and that's just a statement of facts. It's your interpretation of what ruthlessly selfish means to you and what it is to a profession. But there'll be players that aren't anywhere near the side that'll be licking their lips for these two managers potentially to move on. But what Ange has brought out, I think, in some players, there's got to be a certain amount of loyalty there. I was just listening to the radio just before we came on, and that's the headline. They've not won or it's a singular win in so many games. They were almost embarrassed by Rangers in Europe. Embarrassed by Rangers? I know it's a different league. I know the standards are different. I know the size of the clubs are different. Ibrox in front of that type of crowd, with that type of pace, with that type of momentum and electricity in the air, could do funny things to stellar players, and that's where you've got to take that game on its own merits. Back to the league form, the very lazy. I mean, it's all come to the fore again, hasn't it? I think there was an old Frank Lampard interview talking about what his nickname for White Hart Lane was. Roy Keane's mentioned Spurs in the past. There's that description of what a team could possibly be, which involves the word Spurs, which is for current. I mean, banter's the worst word in the world, but we understand the tribalism of what football clubs and teams against each other are. But in a professional working environment, it's a lot of rubbish, really, because it just shows how startlingly tough it is to compete. And you look at what's happening to Man City. Yes, it's nice to have that bank of several Premier Leagues behind you to kind of wave the proverbial two fingers at people that are pointing their fingers at you. But what I've seen from Ange, what I've seen from his teams, it's a thrilling team to watch. It's just not a consistent side that can manage a game within the brackets of 90 plus minutes. You look at the Chelsea game, 2 goals go in, very close to getting a third, and it could have been a completely different game. He's not there telling his players to go absolutely careering into the opposition inside the 18-yard box. That's a distinct lack of professionalism from the players on the pitch. But then the finger gets pointed at the boss. That's how it goes. The same with Russell Martin. He's got defenders. He's got a collective that's bringing pressure on itself, but he wants to play in a certain way. That isn't his certain way, bringing pressure on. This certain way is building in a rhythmic way that opens gaps further up the pitch. And if you look at Southampton, you look at players like Diblin that can get the ball on the half turn, a player that's well coveted, higher up and in Europe, by the way. They've got the players to do that. But if you shoot yourself in your foot at the beginning of what that construct is, then you're never going to get to the players that can use it on the half turn and move forward. So there's a lot to dig out. And I'll tell you what doesn't help with Spurs as well, from the outside looking in, hopefully completely objectively. I've seen players go there. Archie Gray, a season in the Championship. Brennan Johnson, a wonderful kind of rise from the ranks to Nottingham Forest to establish himself on the international stage. Not their fault the cost between 40, 50, 60 million quid at all. Not their fault they're on the type of money that is exorbitant, but very much part of what the geography is of football nowadays. Ex-pros that have won bugger all at Spurs, pointing the finger, going, I can't believe you're doing that. I can't believe he's doing this. You had your time. I get there's a mass media appetite for that, but try and break it down. Try and look at it in a certain way. Archie can play in several positions. He's just a baby. Brennan's got so much to like about him. I love the fact that he kind of, and you boys can tell me a lot more in depth about that, but having seen a lot of Brennan over the last 2, 3, 4 seasons, there's a very consistent player in there that can be reliable. Whether it's at Spurs, time will tell, but he's shown he can score goals in Europe, in the Premier League.
He divides opinion, Prutts. He divides opinion.
I have some frustrations.
He's a bit on the edge, plays on the edge too much.
Because of his product or his approach.
In possession for me. He can't he's possession goes to die with Brennan. If you're in possession, he'll arrive at the back post and he'll score a goal. But if you ask him to create anything himself, take on his fullback, it's just not there.
Yeah.
Do you think, I mean, obviously you bring a player in for that's done what he's done at Forest and fitted in at Forest, and it's a different type of kind of mindset, I think, when it's one of your own and then moves to a club the size of Spurs, and obviously the historical significance of both of these teams is there for all to see. But Spurs, by virtue of its Premier League history, is a bigger football club. Then the expectation and the reality of what he brings and what he provides to the side.
Yeah.
Do you look at the price tag and go, he should be more? Do you look at what he can do in fits and starts and say he should be giving more? Or do you look at what he's done at Forest and say he should be doing more?
No, I don't look at the price tag at all for any player, because, as you rightly say, the price tag isn't their fault. I just look at what they're doing on the pitch. And for me, he came with Ange saying he's come to Tottenham because he wants to step up and take on more responsibility and grow as a player. And I'm not seeing that from him at all. I'm not seeing him step up and take responsibility. I'm not seeing him ask for the ball. I'm not seeing him take accountability for the team, get the team out of trouble, drive the team up the pitch. He might arrive at the back post and stick one into an empty net because the team's created a tap-in for him. But outside of that, I just don't think he's doing anything like enough.
I liken it, Dave. We signed Stephen Pienaar a few years ago. I know Everton are not a small club, and we're similar size, really, in a way. He used to take players on for fun. He came to Spurs for a year and a half and didn't take a player on once.
He only had about 3 games.
But he never did anything. I don't know whether
Gareth Bale was on the left and Lennon on the right.
Well, I know,
never
but
had a chance to
he
play
never did
football.
anything. And I just think sometimes, I think you sort of said it, Dave, when you come to a club like Tottenham from Nottingham Forest, there's pressure on you, and maybe some players just can't handle that.
For me, Brennan, it's a profile thing. Brennan, if we didn't have as many injuries, maybe Odebear was fit and Brennan was in and out the side, still scoring goals, and he is a wide forward finisher, that's great. He's not a creator, and we'd probably be more understanding of what he is. But because
he's playing every game,
he's playing every single game. But because Odebear's not fit, Mikey Morey's only 17, he's not fit. Who are more what Ange had at Celtic, creators in the wing? Then maybe we're not going to look at Brennan with such a microscope, because he is playing every game. We're seeing what his deficiencies. Thus, we're more vocal about it than we would have been if we didn't have such forward line injuries.
The thing is as well with that, I'm absolutely on board with that kind of professional critique, because this is what I mean about being balanced, which is exactly what I'm hearing from everyone sat there that we're discussing. Because you're seeing it with your own eyes, and then you're understanding what you want from that particular player. And I think, going back to Johnny's point about the difference in football club, I think you're absolutely right. And then you then look at whether that player's been bought to play, and that's something that sometimes baffles me when it comes to buying players, and when they're almost kind of the structure or the management come out and say, oh well, it bought for a certain thing, the future, or certain games. But I am a bit more blunt with price tags and stuff. I think he's been bought to start those games, whether it's by luck or by design with regards to players being available in his particular position. I also do believe that the strength and ability of a player to affect a football match can rest on his teammates as well. That's absolutely me not saying about Brennan Johnson saying he should be looking around thinking, well, pointing the finger and everyone's pointing the finger. Shouldn't be that at all. But as a collective, it's obvious that there's a raising of standards that's going to be needed, and a raising of mentality in games where you can either see it out or you can solve the problems put in front of you. And that take on Brennan is, I find, fascinating, because, as I said, I've seen him in the Championship, different kettle of fish altogether. Seen him in the Premier League linking up with the likes of Morgan Gibbs-White, who we had a really good relationship with. But to say it might take a bit of time, I do think is the thing that really sticks in fans' craws, doesn't it? Because you're looking at a player that's not a baby. I mentioned Archie, who was only young, both in football terms and in life terms. But there's more miles on Brennan's clock.
Yep.
So I totally get what you're saying about how it can be frustrating about what you do see in fits and starts, as opposed to what you are actually getting in real time. And then time will tell whether he's a player that's at Spurs that may frustrate and delight in equal measure, and then he moves on to a club that is possibly in between a Spurs or a Forest in the Premier League, or a Forest type team in the Premier League. Time will tell. That's the thing. I mean, without sounding like an old ex-pro, even though I'm going to sound like an old ex-pro, and you collectively you lot would have seen thousands of football matches. It's not the most silky players that cement the places in your hearts and in the minds of what a Spurs fan is. It's the consistent ones, the ones that come in and you know exactly what you're going to get, whether it's a Højbjerg in the middle of the pitch, whether it's various players that have been and gone. You know what you're going to get, and therefore that level and that bar of disappointment is pushed further back because you know exactly what you're going to get. And I just think possibly with the squad that Ange's got and what you see with your own eyes and in games and in real time is, I don't think as a collective you can hang your hat on exactly what you're going to get week in, week out with Spurs.
Absolutely.
Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Dave, you were a player that you could hang your hat on, and I mean that. I genuinely mean that nicely. People, the fans knew what you're going to get. Gary said you were one of the best players on Championship Manager.
We were talking before. Did you ever play Champman?
I didn't know.
Nice.
I didn't. I was too busy doing other things. But I mean, life as a footballer, as a single footballer, is a 3-hour day. So I did have time to play Champ Manager.
No, you were always one of my first signings. Like, could play anywhere across the back line and defensive central midfield. As you said, never let the team down. A solid 6.7 to 7 every game. Never injured. Brilliant.
That's a bit harsh. Right, so 489 career appearances, as I said. Some highlights, David, and obviously we can't let you go without mentioning a red card against the Arsenal.
Highlights would have been my debut, which I made in the League Cup at Bristol City, which was way back in 1999. The chance to then go and play in the Premier League with Southampton was just a joy. And as Johnny knows, I'm still trading on that now because I do commentary from Premier. There'll be somebody sat across the other side of the world going, "He played for who in the Premier League? Are you sure?" And yeah, being able to do that, I mean, it sounds a bit twee, but being able to say that I was a professional footballer, especially when I've got my son's 13 and mad for getting into it and chat and being able to do what I do now as well, which is talk a lot about the EFL and slightly broader football and go to European tournaments and see football all over the continent. To be able to think that I actually did it as a profession gives me a certain level of comfort in it, because I enjoy talking about football. I'm very comfortable, very appreciative of what my career was, and it comes from a place of loving the game and hopefully getting to know the game as I got older. But being able to do that, scoring the odd goal here and there. I scored a goal at Sheffield Wednesday on my debut for them, which was against Rochdale back in League One, which set the most unrealistic expectations for the fans, thinking, does he do this all the time? And I think by the end of that month, I'd played myself out of Gary Megson's team, and he was as effusive in his non-praise of my ability after that particular August as you would assume him to be.
Come on, that red card against Arsenal. Can we talk about that?
It was. I mean, the only good thing that came out of it, knowing obviously what this podcast is, was it was against Arsenal.
Yeah.
And it was Harry Redknapp in charge. We were struggling at the wrong end of the division back in 2005. We had hit some highs with Jamie Redknapp in the side and Peter Crouch in the side. Graham Lasso was there. Nigel Quasi. They were all great. Others, Olivier Bernard and Henri Camara, didn't lift a leg. So cheers for that, lads, for doing your bit back then.
But just joining us on the show, it's Omri Camera. Omri, David Prutts here to talk.
Yeah. And all you'd get would be a blank expression. Me playing with him would have no recollection in his head whatsoever. Because he just kind of stood up front with his hands on his hips and shrugged, which is understandable because we were terrible at the back. But we were playing Arsenal. I got booked for a foul on Matthew Flamini. I mean, last seen turning over billions of dollars somewhere and some huge corporation. So congrats, mate. Saving the world one, I don't know, electric car or bottle at a time. And it took him out, at which point Alan Wiley came up. Come on, calm down. Yellow card. That was borderline a red. The second one on Robert Pires, where I thought the ball was there in inverted commas to be won, just munched his ankle. I mean, it was a disgusting challenge. And then the linesman flagged and then proceeded to inform Alan that it was a second. In of itself, it was a red card. It was an horrendous challenge. Alan gives me a second yellow card. I then think, right, you've given me that, but it's the lino's fault, so I'll go and have a word with him. And then proceeds to be Alan stood in front of us. Alan's 5'6", and I'm just under 6 foot, so I'm looking over his head. It's not you I'm trying to get to, it's him. And then he's flagging. Harry Redknapp comes down, drags me away, so it's looking even worse. And then I get taken. And this is all before half time. So half time's 2 minutes away. And then I get a severe telling off from Harry. Is, as his voice goes up the octave, lads. It's like, I mean, by the end of it, it's just a whistle about how annoyed he is with me. And then we proceed. I get a 10-game ban, 11 games left of the season. Cheers, FA. Thank you very much. So we had this slightly comical, in hindsight, hearing where I sit with a panel. 4 regional FA affiliates come in, you get a finger wagging. Harry came and vouched for me for a couple of minutes, then had to go because he'd left his car on a meter. Sorry, Dave, car's on a meter. Cheers, Gaffer, thanks. See you in 3 months. And then, came back, got telling off, apologised to everybody everywhere. And then things were never the same again. But it's these things, chaps, that I think they're called character building. But I've seen players get a lot less for a lot more in the last 20 odd years. But am I bitter? You're damn right.
David, really great to talk to you, to chat about Southampton and your career and have a laugh, because we need it right now as Tottenham fans. Really great to talk to you, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Fingers crossed, chaps. Keep the faith.
Thank you.